What's up guys, Stobbie here, and I wanted to do a quick build overview video where I show you guys some of the experimentation that I've been doing with my offline campaigns. This particular one is the Faith Militant, which tests two things primarily that I wanted to find out. First of all, how to get the cultists into the late game and what that would be like. As you can see here, I've got them to day 275, so I've certainly done that. And secondly, I wanted to try a composition of weapons, which is entirely blunt weapons up front. Just ignore the one guy with the flail. That was an experimentation that didn't go well. So it's all two-handed maces up front. And then this is a first for me on the back line. I'm going for crossbow builds where there's no archers. The guys in the back line use crossbows and they also have axe mastery. The idea being that they do good damage to just about everything with their crossbows, but then when there are enemies with shields, you've got four guys in the back line who can quick hands to a long axe and be able to break a shield, which actually I think is pretty important to facilitate the frontline guys, especially when the frontline lads are using weapons that don't have a plus to hit chance. And I'm getting ahead of myself now. So basically, I'm just going to go do this fight here against many ancient honor guards to put this into context. But the lessons learned from this playthrough have basically broken down into two categories. Firstly, lessons that are specific to the cultist background and lessons that are specific to the weapon composition that I've gotten. Now I'll deal with the cultist background lessons first. One thing that struck me once I started getting into the cultists, like day 90 plus, and you start getting higher levels of dedication to Dovekul, is how good these levels are. Primarily at the main thing I want to point out is at level 4 of your dedication to Dovekul, you get here, Disciple of Dovekul. So it's plus 20 hit points, which is wonderful. So right from the start, you don't really have to put that many points into hit points for your guys. Plus 2 fatigue recovery per turn is huge, and plus 10 resolve, which is also quite nice. A lot of my frontline guys have like plus 63, and of course it's made for a bannerman who is pretty impressive with his... Where's my bannerman? It's made for a bannerman who has really high numbers, 141, which is pretty damn good at 13, and that's not even including if you give him a potion of the lion to increase his resolve even further. One of the problems I've had in the past with the cultists is how to deal with the sacrifices. And what I found was, if I stopped worrying about guys getting sacrificed and just accepted that it's going to happen, that's one way to kind of just be okay with it. And secondly, keeping low-level, junk brothers like beggars and whatnot, purely for the purpose of sacrificing, is absolutely a viable strategy. For most of the 275 days of the campaign, I've always kept at least 2 guys in reserve who are beggars or cripples or whatnot, and ideally anyone who has the happy to be in reserve mood talent. You just keep them in reserve, and then when it's time to make a sacrifice, more often than not, or actually quite often, surprisingly often, you get a chance to sacrifice one of your beggars. That ends up not costing you anything of one of your, highly skilled lads. There has been a bit of a complication in the fact that, look, getting hunters is difficult enough. Anyone who's seen my Damage Inc. playthrough will know how much I've struggled to get hunters, but there's an added complication with the cultists because your brothers get upset when people get sacrificed and they leave. Really what it means is you need to be able to kill necro savants and make the happy powder, and have happy powder in reserve if you want to get any hunters into your group. So it's just an added hurdle. Like before you can even look to hire a hunter, you need to get some happy powder on hand to make sure that you can get over that extra mood debuff. Last thing I'll say about the cultists, which I absolutely loved, and the highest level of devotion to Dovekul my bannerman actually has. I think it's called Chosen or Prophet of Dovekul. What's it called? Yeah, Prophet of Dovekul. So look, he gets an additional 5 to melee and range defense, plus all the other bonuses. Look at that, not affected by fresh injury sustained during the current battle. So all your brothers that have level 5 and above devotion don't even need Iron Will Potion. They don't even suffer the injuries. I mean, like you get the little icon, but you don't suffer the stat debuff of injuries, which is amazing. But look at this, Voice of Dovekul. Become the flesh and conduit and the earthen voice of Dovekul. Speak truth to his followers and make them give their everything to please their god. It costs you 6 AP, and you build up 35 fatigue. but it lowers the fatigue of every cultist, friend or foe, by -10 instantly. Anyone not a cultist is not affected. What this means is it helps buff up the fatigue of everybody else all around you. It's absolutely incredible. I haven't been using it that much. I have noticed that the bannerman will get sick in battles. I believe that when you use that Voice of Dovecul ability, there is a percentage roll to see whether you then get affected with sickness, which is basically -25 to all your stats. So yeah, that's pretty much the last of my lessons drawn from the cultist background. Long story short, the cultist background is incredibly powerful. Actually, wait, what I should point out is, as I pivot now to talking about the weapon lessons from the way I've actually set these guys up, which is to say that if I play cultists again, I'm going to give them weapons that give them plus to hit shots. These frontline two-handed weapon lads, I think they'd be better off with great swords. I think they need the plus hit chance buff, because a lot of the cultist guys that you get and the classes of lads you have to hire in the early game really don't have great combat stats. So I've gotten lucky with a couple of lads here, but like Henrik is a prime example. Look, he's confident, but he's only got 85 melee skill. Look, Hugo, even confident, only 82. He's got like 76 base. Mid 70s base for a lot of these lads. Ewald here is one of the starting guys, and he is a superstar. Look at that. 3 in melee defense, 2 in melee skill, and Iron Lung. So just consider for a moment that you get 15 base fatigue recovery, plus 4 from Iron Lungs, plus 2 from Chosen of Dovecul. So he regenerates 21 fatigue per turn. And now I think I'm missing out some of the potential of this fatigue I could be using with this weapon setup. I mean, I do love these two-handed maces. See, miss, fucks. But the two-handed maces all up front has had a number of benefits that I've really liked, and has come as a bit of a surprise. The main thing is that I think you can be a little bit more forgiving with the fatigue numbers of your guys up front. The reason being is because at most, even with Berserk, you're only going to be swinging with your two-handed mace twice every turn. And with 12 fatigue, so you're only going to be spending 24 fatigue every turn. So what that means is, like, normally with a two-handed weapon user on the front line, I want their fatigue to be at least 75, but I've had some of these guys when they were lower levels at, like, hell, even sub 50. I had one guy with like 45 fatigue as he was leveling up, but the fact that he gets the plus fatigue regeneration from his devotion to Dovecul, and he's not even using that much to begin with, means that he can go 3 or 4 turns even having Berserk proc, and look at how low the fatigue is staying. And the lower fatigue usage has another added benefit, and this became most clear when fighting Unhold, because when you're fighting Unhold or Orc Young, where you have to keep spamming Indom, consider the fact that you spend 12 fatigue to attack, and then you spend 25 fatigue for Indom, which is what, 12, that's 37 fatigue, which is quite a lot. However, on a lot of the other weapons, like a great sword or a great axe, you would also be using 14 or 15 for your main attack, and then if it procs again, you're going to be using even more fatigue, especially if it's a great sword where you use sweep for 25 fatigue and then split for another 25. That's 50 right there. So I'm not explaining it very articulately, but the feeling I have when fighting against Unhold or Orcs, that I'm able to attack once and go into Indomitable, attack once, go to Indomitable, for quite a few more turns than I would if I'm using another weapon. So yeah, oh yes, one last thing. The effect of days of the two-handed mace is not to be underestimated. What I have noticed is when I have 7 guys up front, or 6 here, all applying days, and this I've noticed most when, again, fighting against the Unhold. You have, let's say you've got 7 guys up front and you're in contact with 5 or 6 Unholds. You're able to apply days to all of those Unholds. You are reducing the damage output of those Unholds by 30% across the board, because days reduces damage by 30%. And it lowers initiative by 30% and fatigue by 30%. So it's really, really good against the big bads, ones that can't be stunned. I will say that these experimentations I'm doing, where I'm going for all one weapon type, has pointed out what should actually be an obvious lesson to me, which is that having just one weapon type across the board is overall not that good, because you aren't getting the advantages of the decapitate from the cleaver and the disarm from the cleaver, and the stagger and the top-notch armor destruction of hammers. So a split of weapons is definitely the way to go. But I will say, having nothing but maces up front indirectly buffs the survivability of your brothers by lowering the offensive capability of your enemies. Now, last but not least, my crossbowmen. I'm in two minds about my crossbowmen, and as you can see, I've tried a few different builds here. We didn't, in that type of fight, get to show off how powerful they are in terms of inflicting injuries, and then getting the extra damage with Executioner from those injuries. But I will say that with this build over here, with maces up front and crossbows at the back, I don't have any AoE, so this build struggles against swarms of zombies. You really need to be able to be sweeping and splitting and taking multiple shots with a bow to take care of all those numbers. So this build is not great against swarms of zombies, but it is better against, you know, groups of big bads like orcs and unholds and whatnot. Now, trying crossbows like this has just reaffirmed my belief that warbows are better than crossbows, even heavy crossbows, 9 out of 10 times. And also this experimentation here with... Can you explain my thinking behind going crossbow mastery and axe mastery? Just okay, this Robert is a bad example. I forgot to take footwork on him. In this build here, I would have dropped Executioner and taken footwork, which I think I did on one of the other lads. I've really screwed these guys up. But like, I'm in two minds as to the whole hybrid, you know, ranged weapon and melee weapon build. I think if I'm going to do it in any combination, it'll be with an axe, because at least the axe mastery gives you the shield split. And as you saw in that fight there, when you're up against an enemy where you can't do anything with your crossbow and your threats are on the front line, it's very nice and convenient to be able to switch to an axe, break shields, and facilitate the front guys fighting. It's also doubly nice when your frontline guys have axe mastery, so if they do get caught out in melee combat, they can switch to that sort of setup and not be completely helpless. They're not great fighters, but they aren't helpless when caught out in melee combat. I think what I want to try is switching out crossbow mastery or bow mastery and keep trying axe mastery. I'll cover a slightly different build on my next build overview, which is where I went all axes on the front line. And then on the back line, I went throwing mastery with duelist, which you guys keep recommending, and I was quite interested in that. But overall, I kind of like giving axe mastery to my ranged fighters. They almost never, and someone like Anton here with his 46 skill here, melee skill, is never going to hit. I mean, if he gets super high level, I can keep pumping points into melee skill, but as I leveled him up to level 11, I had to take points in ranged skill, and of course buff his fatigue and some of his hit points, so I didn't feel like I could ever put points into melee skill to make him a true hybrid fighter. These guys are quasi-hybrid fighters. They do their damage with their ranged weapon, and the axe mastery is just to facilitate the front line by breaking shields. So yeah, overall, that's the Faith Militant. Cultists are super powerful. Remember, with cultists, keep a few sacrifices on hand. Label your guys when they become cultists. Put like a C in bracket to mark them as cultists, so that when you get the event, you can see which one's a cultist, which one's not. All blunt weapons up front is pretty good, but I wouldn't recommend all blunt weapons. This has reaffirmed my desire to always have at least two blunt, two-handed weapon. Two-handed maces on the front line to be able to daze. You'll notice in my Season 23 build of Damage Inc., I don't have any two-handed maces, but we do have builds that do almost the same thing, which is the Torturer build with the Battle Whip. I do think that Disarm is actually stronger than Daze for most enemies. Of course, you can't disarm unholds, but this really reminds me, though, that in any given build, you want at least two brothers who can either disarm or daze big threats. So when you're fighting those orc warlords and the very big scary bads, you can either stun them, disarm them, or daze them. Okay, yeah, cultists are very strong, but like I said, I think, at least in the beginning, before you've had time to search for a bunch of absolute superstars and then keep them with you for long enough to convert them, you need to think about giving weapons in the front line that's going to help them hit, because a lot of them aren't going to be great fighters. Someone like Henrik here, he really should be using a great sword. Also remember the fact that with the extra fatigue regeneration, he's going to be able to sweep and split quite a lot more. So when it comes to cultists, use great swords, be prepared to sacrifice people, don't start hiring hunters unless you are prepared to have them leave. Be very aggressive with trying to find and kill necro savants so you can make happy powder. Basically, once you have happy powder on hand, you can then start searching for a hunter, and you can keep a hunter in your group. If someone else gets sacrificed, immediately give him the happy powder so that he won't leave, because of course hunters are so precious. Yeah, so that's the Faith Militant. I hope you guys find this interesting. I certainly enjoyed playing them, but they're not my favorite. In the next build overview, we will go over the Skjoldung tribe, which is all axes up front. I'll give you a quick little sneak peek, but before I do that, a dedicated video for them. This is the lone wolf background. Where's my lone wolf? Not Carsten, it's Stobbie here. Look at this, all bardishas and great axes up front. There's a lot of nice benefits, and of course guys with throwing. Well, let's not get into it. That'll be in the next build video. Thanks for watching, friends. I'll see you all next time.